just said bye to Tay, and it's very cold, and it's 6:04 in the morning. I was gonna try to find like a Walgreens or a Target nearby that was open, so I could buy a beanie for myself because my head's cold, but B, a big sign so I could write "Go Tay" or something on it. But everything's closed right now. I got a beanie and I got Starbucks. On my bike. City's pretty quiet, which is nice. Also, I don't think I'm on a main road, which is pretty nice. So, let's see, not many cars out. It's also Sunday morning. But yeah, so my first stop is I am seeing Tay at mile 5, which is right next to Hotel Lincoln. So right now I'm mapping myself to Hotel Lincoln. Well, I think I found Hotel Lincoln. Somewhere around like mile 20, I think. Yeah, Tay.
This is my first marathon ever, and it was really amazing. There's something really special about world major marathons from what I've heard. The crowd is just so much bigger. There's so much more hype around them. The energy is just unmatched. There's 45,000 runners. You're not going to get that at any other kind of marathon, and that energy just really carries you. Those of you that don't know, world major is one of like the biggest marathons. It's where world records happen and things like that. There's 6, 3 are in the US, which is really cool. So Chicago, New York, Boston, Berlin, Tokyo, London are the 6 world majors. Please take everything with a grain of salt if you are training for a marathon yourself or training for a different kind of race. Our bodies are very different. My body's a lot more adapted to running in general. So that's my disclaimer. Anna Busili, I'm sorry, I just know I butchered that. How long did you train for this? There's a couple of correct answers. So I trained for the marathon for 16 weeks, but I did train for and do a half marathon prior to that. And then prior to training for the half marathon over the winter, I was intentionally doing speed workouts and tempo workouts and things like that. So I was training for this marathon for 16 weeks, but I've really been training for it since like last December at the same time. Ninja Turtler asked how I keep myself mentally engaged. They said that they find themselves getting bored on long runs. I'm not mentally engaged. I don't know where I am. I'm not home. There's no thoughts, and for me, it's like a meditative state. Larry Holland asked what I ate the day before. We woke up and we did a 2-mile shakeout run and went to the expo, and then we went to coffee, and I just got like a club sandwich. I didn't want to experiment with too many different foods, and then I had some snacks at the hotel, and we went out to dinner, and I had a big bowl of pasta. I'm not like a big carbo load where you're like eating pasta for every meal for days and days, or like even a big bowl of pasta the night before. I ate the big bowl of pasta because that's what sounded good, and I wanted to stay away from anything that might take longer to digest, like things high in fiber, so like a salad and stuff like that, because I didn't want to feel like my intestines were heavy the next day during the marathon. Creation coach Elena asked, what would be the best way to get into running for someone who doesn't run at all? This is really difficult for me to answer because I've never not been into running. So I've never had to get into running from zero, but I have been injured and had to go months without running. First workouts back, when I do that, it's always some form of run/walk. So it might be run for 30 seconds, walk for a minute, run for 30 seconds, walk for a minute, and do that for like 30 minutes. And the reason I like doing something like that is because it's time on your feet and miles on your legs. It doesn't matter how fast you're going. It's just about getting your body used to that first. Then you can worry about pace. It helps get your body back into like running and being out of breath and things like that without the mental giant of you have to run for 30 minutes straight, which is like really tough if you haven't ran ever or you haven't ran in months. So I really like that because you can build up, and you could do that multiple times a week for weeks, and you're never doing a run all the way through, but I guarantee the parts where you are running are going to get a lot faster. And the walking part, you're going to feel a lot more recovered. And you can play around with running for longer and walking for shorter. And, you know, like you get to kind of start having fun with it. It's just about having fun. You don't have to run straight through. I was a college track athlete, and there were only 2 or 3 days a week where I would go on a run and not stop. All the other days were run, stand there for a couple minutes, run, stand there for a couple minutes, run, stand there for 30 minutes, you know, and I'm still a runner. I'm still running. It's just a different type of running. So don't be afraid to stop or walk or whatever. That's just a different version of running, and you're going to get better at it. My best friend asked which mile was the hardest and which mile was the most fun. Mentally and physically, mile 23 and 24 were the hardest. And part of that is that you go out and then you loop back around. So when you're at mile 23, you can see people at mile 24. And that's just mentally really tough because to see how far a mile is, it's far and you're tired and you're so close to being done, but you're not done yet. And that was just really tough. And then on top of that, miles 23 and 24 are so barren compared to every other mile because people want to watch their friends and family finish the race. And so they're all at miles 25 and 26. And no one's at 23 and 24. My favorite mile 18 or something like that. It was, I honestly can't remember, but we were on this big street and there were people on the left and people in the center divider, and like the divider was like 2 levels. So they were on the top level too, and it was just, it felt so packed, and the street had kind of narrowed a little bit, which made it feel extra packed with runners. And it just was like, it was really energizing, and I thought that was super fun. Ash MK asked what was my training schedule. Monday was a workout. Tuesday was a recovery run. Wednesday was another workout. Thursday was a rest day, but I would usually do some sort of strength training. Friday was a recovery run. Saturday was my long run, and Sunday was off. But the details of that and the mileage, I started at like 35 miles and I got up to like 50 miles. Nikki F. Hall asked if there was anything I would have done differently. Yes, I think I would have trusted my training a bit more. This is my first marathon. I've only ever raced a half marathon before that, and in college I ran the 800. So my experience racing longer distances and being able to gauge how I'm feeling is very little. It was going really well and I was on a great pace, but from miles 20 to 24, which I left him at 24, the pacer had slowed down a ton because the pacer's job is to cross the finish line at the pace that they're pacing for. So this pacer is pacing for 3:45. Up until mile 20, he was going much faster than 3:45 pace. So at mile 20, he had to slow it back down a lot so that they crossed the line at the right time. I wasn't paying attention to that. In hindsight, I was knocking out like 8:20s, 8:15s up until mile 20, and then we slowed down to like 8:40. Would have much rather have maintained that 8:20 and then died a little bit at the end. Probably could have broken 3:40, but that's okay. It's a learning lesson. Steffi Finds Happiness asked, what's her foot strike? What's her cadence? How should I train to get faster? Do not, this is my opinion, I'm not a professional, I'm not a coach. Do not pay attention to anyone else's foot strike or cadence. And pretty much don't pay attention to your foot strike or cadence. I have never heard anyone talk about cadence, and I don't think it's important at all because cadence is based so much off of your pace and your leg length. I think there's way more valuable data points to pay attention to. If you can go on a run and your knees don't hurt and you're not getting shin splints and you're not getting plantar fasciitis, you're good. Don't give a shit about your cadence. You definitely shouldn't be leaning back. Your foot should be hitting somewhere under your hip when it hits the ground. If it's not, consult a PT. More often than not, it's just a lack of muscle and strength in a certain area, and a PT can help you assess that, identify it, and work on it. Ashley Miranda asked, how many miles do a pair of running shoes last me? Usually throw out my running shoes somewhere around 300 to 350 miles. Jenna D asked, favorite mid-run food. So I don't eat real food during my runs. I take some sort of gel. I really like GU. I've heard great things about Maurten and SIS, which stands for Science in Sport. Helena Metzger asked, how did you maintain energy throughout? Best nutrition tips for long runs. If my run was 10 miles or more, I would have some sort of fuel and fueling every 5 miles. The Only Mary Elizabeth asked, why did you decide to run a marathon? Why not? I saw a bunch of people run Chicago and New York last year, and I was like, that looks really cool. I'm gonna do it, so I did it. Bethany Hewus, I didn't say that right, asked, what would you do differently in training for your next marathon? I take training a lot more seriously. Just a lot of training. I didn't take it too seriously. Jasmine Jarlsberg asked, what are my favorite shoes? I trained in Nike Pegasus all throughout college. I love those. I ran in the Nike Alpha Flies, and I love them. They treated me very well. I also really love the Salomon Aeroglides for like easier runs. Kelsey Renee 716 asked, what is the best way to train and what's a good first race? I'm assuming she means best way to train for a marathon. There's some great like free running plans online. If you have a time goal, then I would look into getting a coach or a more legit plan, a paid for plan or something like that. Good cities. I've heard Eugene is great and really flat. It's much smaller. Chicago is extremely flat and fast. I would recommend looking into the Revel Road races. They're downhill races, which is super fun. It makes you feel super fast because you're literally running downhill. KTHMPTN, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, asked if I'm going to try to go for all 6 world majors. It's not the top of my bucket list. I think eventually I probably will end up doing it. Spana83 said, do you train with your menstrual cycle in mind? I don't, and that's always been okay for me. Laura Shriver said, what's going through your mind the entire 3 hours? I couldn't tell you. I was just running. I don't have any thoughts. Shania Runs asked, did you have a goal time? I did. My goal was sub 3:45. That's what I trained for. I think that's all. Oh, my legs hurt. Oh.
How do you feel? You feel like a new person.
This is me, almost 36 hours post-marathon, and I'm gonna try to run.
On your marks, get set, go. You look like an old lady who has to poop. You don't look too bad. You just look,
That's all I got.
you look very unathletic.